As the world globalizes, education is globalizing as well. No longer is education a local experience, but one that brings students from thousands of miles away. As China continues its rise in economic dominance, many of its students are educated abroad, especially in the United States. Even though many Chinese students spend their most formative years studying in a foreign country, they still return home because of a variety of political, economic, and cultural reasons.
In this presentation, we will be examining the intricate linkages of the international education system and the many reasons why the Chinese students are drawn back to their home countries after years of studying in the United States. From China's point of view, bringing back Chinese students is crucial. If a Chinese student were to leave the country after all their educational investment, it would be a complete loss for the Chinese educational system.
When Chinese students look to apply to colleges, their search is not only domestic. Because many of the prospective Chinese students have two choices, Chinese or American universities, they compare the entrance requirements. In the US, most colleges require the SAT or ACT and possibly an entrance essay. Some colleges, like Dickinson, do not even require students to submit standardized test scores. As the Boston University newspaper describes, failing the Chinese college entrance exams means the end of the world to some Chinese students. Chinese education stresses the memorization of facts, while U.S. schools demands self-education outside the classroom and practical applications of the class knowledge they impart. Another stressful difference between the two exams is that the Chinese exam, called the Gaokao, is offered one time during the year as opposed to the SAT or ACT. The Gaokao is also a one-shot test, which means that the test can only be taken one time during the student's last year of high school. In contrast, the SAT or ACT can theoretically be taken 7 times in 1 year. The Gaokao is a much more advanced exam that is based entirely on the subjects that the students learned during their time at school and requires the students to know 2 test days worth of information. So the students taking the Gaokao are much more concerned about brute memorization than what they would be if they took the SAT or ACT. This strenuous examination is in place to sort the Chinese students into various higher learning institutions. After completing the examination, Chinese students submit a list of schools they would like to attend and wait. Around 1/4 of them will not receive admission to any school in mainland China. Based on the vast differences between both countries' standardized tests, it is easy to see why many Chinese students opt for the American college entrance process.
Today, the amount of Chinese students who chose American institutions is substantial. According to the Chronicle of Higher Education, 287,260 Chinese students hold active U.S. student visas. Chinese students account for nearly 29% of foreign students studying in the United States. China contributes twice as many students as the next closest contributor, India. There has been a 6-fold increase in Chinese students studying in America over the past 15 years. The need to penetrate the Chinese student market has been further exacerbated by the financial crisis and budget cuts in the United States. Some of the largest increases in Chinese students have been seen in public universities that have suffered severe budget cuts by state legislatures. It is stated by the U.S. Department of Commerce that international students contribute more than $24 billion to the U.S. economy. The entrance exams are not the only reason that Chinese students choose to study in America. American institutions are some of the best in the world, and having a degree from one can greatly increase a student's employability. While it may seem like many of these Chinese students would stay in America after their time at an American institution, the Chinese government has been fighting hard to create a reverse brain drain where Chinese students return to their native country after spending time in America.
Sea turtles, or heigui, as they are called in Mandarin Chinese, is the term for Chinese students who study overseas and return to China. One reason why these sea turtles are not staying in the U.S. is because of the U.S.'s reduction of work visas. More than a decade ago, America was offering 195,000 work visas and now they are offering only around 65,000. Over 80% of Chinese students who returned home felt that there were greater opportunities for them in China as opposed to the US. And while the American government has turned down many of these potential international students, the Chinese government has been working hard to make them come home. A strategy in China was developed in 2002 to entice returnees under the slogan of improving services for returned students. This policy includes job introduction centers for returned students, preferential policies like higher professional titles, letting family members move to new cities where returnees find jobs, and increasing support for scientific research. In 2008, the Chinese government developed the 1,000 Talent Program, which hopes to attract many of the Chinese students who studied overseas. The new program offers a subsidy of up to $160,000. The Chinese government has good reason to be spending this much money on attracting back these sea turtles. The state's role in the welfare of its citizens is a complex system. The government invests some of its money into education in hopes of creating a positive reinforcing feedback loop. By investing in education now, they hope that these students will become the future leaders and entrepreneurs that will contribute to the Chinese GDP. But if their talented students leave the country that has invested in their primary education and settle in America after their university study, then all that investment is wasted. There is a separate flow to a different stock, that is, the US's GDP. China's investment is misdirected from the original goal and makes an ineffective system. If China is able to entice the students who studied in America to return abroad, then it is a larger benefit to the Chinese system. China can get the benefits of the American institutions without investing in those institutions' infrastructure. The Economic Journal argues that based on pure economic analysis, there are certain countries that always have a reverse brain drain. That is to say that their students studying abroad are actually beneficial to them. They found that most other large countries like China experience small gains to their labor force when their students study abroad. If China is able to create the reverse brain drain that they desire, it will actually be more beneficial to them.
While China's government is doing its best to attract back Chinese students abroad, it seems that economic opportunities are enticing them just as much. The average age of a returnee is 33, some would say the prime working age. Many Chinese students are brought back home because of the lack of familiarity with America's culture. They crave the language, family, and connections they had back in China. Along with the familiarity and comfort of China, many Chinese students also cite their desire to contribute to the building of their national economy. And 87% of returnees from both China and India said that a strong factor in their original decision to come home is the growing demand for their skills in the home country. By 2022, it is estimated that the Chinese middle class will have a purchasing power parity comparable to Italy or Brazil. China's consumption is increasing exponentially as they are assumed to be the world's second largest consumer and may soon catch up to the US. With the rising domestic market, many of the talented students returning from the US see a country rife with business opportunities. Not to mention the fact that Chinese feel more comfortable working within a culture that they already knew and grew up in. Fears of a Chinese brain drain might be slightly exaggerated. While it is true that many Chinese students study in the US, it is still only a minuscule amount of the college-age Chinese students. And beyond that, whether for reasons of government policy or economic opportunity, many Chinese students are seeing the benefits of returning home. It remains to be seen whether China's growing middle class will decrease the amount of Chinese students who study abroad as Chinese institutions increase in quality. But for now, China is content with this symbiotic relationship. American universities are content to receive the money that foreign students bring to them, and the Chinese government is content to utilize America's extensive secondary schooling system.